know we have physical health, but it's still easier to ask someone how a doctor's appointment went about their leg rather than get into the details of, are you speaking to someone? Are you getting support for this? Or, beyond the normal stuff like losing someone to death, which is horrible. But there are also other things that lead to depression and a lot of pain and anxiety that aren't just about the common things. So I think it's about creating that environment, like I said, like making people feeling like they're able to come forward and say, I'm having a really rough day. I'm really struggling today. I want to come and speak to someone. Raising it in sermons, with our youth groups and youth people, discussing it in our own private discipleship groups. I think, again, raising awareness, like you guys mentioned as well, and really, really normalizing it so it doesn't become or doesn't feel dismissive or become another taboo topic type of thing. And then once we are presented with the opportunity, then we can, go back to everything that's been mentioned and we know how to support that person, but we need to first create an environment for them to be able to do that.
I think the challenge and the reason why we are talking about it, talking about normalizing this is, as human beings, it's easier to understand when I tell you I've got a broken hand, because you can see it. And we try to look at it and see, oh yeah, they've got a bandage, they've got a plaster. But when you talk about broken mind or I can't see it, I can't feel it. And that's how human beings operate. So that's why it becomes more difficult. So the more we talk about it, the more we discuss, normalize and break down the stigmas, that would be helpful.
Yeah, and I think also sometimes when I talk about not being able to relate, sometimes in your efforts to empathize, you try and go to the closest you've ever experienced. So someone comes to you that aren't feeling really depressed and really not doing very well, the closest you can equate if you haven't dealt with that is sadness. And so then you go to the you just push through all that, become keep busy, have you spoken to your friend, but then realizing it's not the same thing. And so sometimes I feel like you tend to empathize and can practice this, and also you don't tend to, but you don't have that sense.
Yeah. So just to add to what we've all said, if a Christian is struggling with suicidal thoughts, that's what we mentioned, or mental illness, they need to seek out medical help and therapy. And most importantly, pray to God about their feelings. And there is nothing wrong with seeking help from doctors, therapists, or counselors. God has placed professional doctors, therapists, counselors in their position for a reason. St. Luke was a physician. He was a doctor. So there's nothing wrong with that, seeking help. When somebody breaks a bone, a fracture, what does the person do? You dial 999 and then they ask you whether it's fire or health or what. You want the police. So when there's a mental health, suicidal thoughts, don't try to handle it on your own. Direct that person to that, or you are going through that. Continually seek professional help. It's available. Don't try to handle things on your own. Yes, you haven't done anything wrong. You need help. Just like a broken bone needs orthopedics surgeon to fix it. So mental health, as Jane said, you cannot see the brain. So there's so much stigma that people will say, oh, try to just try. Be a man, especially men are not supposed to weep, isn't it? But Jesus wept. He was a man. So let's seek help. And there's nothing wrong with seeking help.
I'm glad that question came up because I was going to ask 2 questions. One of which is, what role has the church played retrospectively looking back in the last 10 years, we've just looked at that 10-year milestone. So where's the church been? And I guess we've said, well, not really centre place at all. So my other question is, where should we be in the next 10 years? How are we going to address that? Other comments as well. I think it's not helpful. We've got to watch our language. Yeah. I think it's not helpful to talk about labelling.
Yeah.
Actually label someone. We mustn't label somebody because then we will
Yeah.
into a box and
Yeah.
Thank goodness we've got well-being training, workplace these days. You know, which is great. Finally, the corporate world's actually got it.
Yeah.
It's the corporate world, streets ahead. I mean, whether they talk much about that. But there's streets ahead of the policies, and this they have to. They realise they have to do it. Yeah. So the church is way behind. I think in general. So my question is, sorry, another observation about training and just what you can't. So that smacks to me of what else is missing. You haven't known. Yeah, the E is missing. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So
Well,
I think that's really, really important. I think the ministry teams, you know, that it's not doesn't really be but so in the next 10 years, where should the church be, and how are we going to get there? So it's a big question.
I think it's also it's God pressing it on our hearts because we need to be front and center of anything that helps and serves humanity for the ambitions. That's really something we need to be part of. Yes, we've been missing from the stage due to a lot of theological mishaps and how we've been treated. This I would personally apologize for the church and the people we harmed by thinking we need to, you know, people around to live services, people they spiritualize and demonize and think we've done this from a lack of knowledge, and we're here and we're sorry, and we want to move forward, helping people. My right now, my business is that I'm actually studying so that I can have more therapeutic policies, not just medical that I am now. Because I believe churches should actually have on the pastoral care team or on some, you know, some sort of staffing team, psychologists, counselors, and therapists on team, on staff, serving the people in our churches. I really believe this is a model that in the next 10 years, if we have policies, as you say, and if we have people actually trained to help people in this way. In our church, I know there's people employing psychologists or employing counselors, pastors themselves have degrees in these things and will practice before, and so they're part of the team and they have the knowledge. Or people have the knowledge to refer to. Like if so, I know on our team, 11 a.m. team, someone comes in and someone doesn't quite get it, it takes and then I join the conversation and okay, maybe we need to this sort of thing. So maybe having people that have that eye, that have the particle spirit on them, in and amongst us, because the solution is in us. We're the hands and feet of us. So I think this is where God wants to take us, I think. And hopefully we'll like the corporate world, make some strides in actually having professional, not people that are guessing.
You're talking about the weakness on that. I think you're absolutely right, but I think there's something about the DNA, the organisation culture. And you're absolutely right. Part of that strategy is to employ someone and so on. But we need to be preaching and speaking to be the DNA.
Yeah.
If you think about the body, the medic, the body is vitally important. And the body of the church, what is that? That's what is Christ. But you know, we need to have acceptance and empathy. And the body is going to move as well as this spine without it. And if we stopped, which I believe we have in one area, something's caused us to stop, the body has stopped working. There's something in the spine here that's not connected. We've lost a connectivity. In my opinion, mental health is absolutely key. Speaking about it, this is a wonderful start tonight. Yes. We need to put bodies up, and well, I'll definitely be going up. Well, this is strategy.
What's this strategy?
Yes, spot on. I agree with you. We have to start with small steps.
Yeah.
And build it up. I don't want to promise. In case there's someone here who is not from church, and will be looking at what the church is for. We'll start with small steps. And it's one of those small steps. And by the grace of God, we'll build it up. Because, as I said, and I think they also mentioned something in that line. Mental health is not easy unless you understand it. And when I say it's not easy, it's because it's the complex nature of the mind. When you think you understand a human being, they can, just like God, just like a creator. You never get to fully understand a human being's mind. But training. Paul tells Timothy, study, show thyself approved. A workman that does not need to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. That means we are balanced. We are not just talking about heaven, but we are helping people to live here and be fruitful, productive, be able to do what they need to do. So I think we are acknowledging this need for training for church workers and everyone serving in church. And we may not even need to employ anybody. These are the conversations that build. This is where the work begins. We have so many people in, well, I'll talk of ECC because I don't know anywhere else. I'm sure we have so many people trained and have knowledge of mental health. How about those small steps, small conversations? Just make it part of our conversations, our group setting that we are normalizing it, that anyone can feel, oh, it's safe to talk about it here. That's what will help. Because I could bring you so many professionals here and fill the room, and you walk away, but you don't feel safe to open up. But if we know each other and we start having this conversation, everyone can think, oh, it's okay to talk here. We build a culture that encourages and enforces what we want to do. We'll get there.
I think also to build on that actually, but judgment body, a lot of bodies here. I don't think COVID helps that. To be honest, we had a case where COVID happened, everyone could watch from home. With work as well, it's like a lot of people remote working. To be honest, this year I've been in the office. Never. And you have a situation where you just by yourself, isolated, going through anything. It's unlikely you're going to speak to someone unless it's on like a Zoom call or a Teams call. But really, you should be talking about business. So I personally think a lot of mental health experts, but I think we need to really encourage people to come physically to church, and then stop the virtual.
We'll take one more question and we'll just kind of get started.
I was going to say that I had a but so I've got generalized anxiety disorder and depression. And one of the things that has helped me is that in my church, rather than thinking of things in terms of the extremism of like it has to be a pastor or working on when I'm looking at my friends who just is everything okay or they would tell me to be able to reach the level you watch it when you're being on. So it's not just about the things that you guys do, like the panel or being a volunteer or hospital show, because that was actually what connections people have with their friendships. Like, if someone doesn't turn up, you notice or in a thing that by all the message really busy, because a lot of the time they can be they're so stressed or whatever they work, they physically can't get to show, so they can't get to church or who just they thinking about it in terms of like very large things as opposed to the smaller aspects. How is the person or but even sometimes the language that we use where you haven't seen someone in the church for a while and then you do see them and you're like, oh yeah, everybody was stuck with the short stuff. That's not it. Saying to you it may seem as though oh hey, it's good to see you back, but to a person it's like condemning them in a sense. So it's not just about the specificness, but it's also about the Christian needs that we use, and also there's a lot of other barriers to mental health in the church, and then if someone makes certain comments, it's out there and you want to back because they're not going to jump on it, or they're going to dismiss it, or they're going to put around like more tradition, but is like, basically are in a safe space, not just on the hospital's part, with the living patient, where are they in the safe space? So,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, when it comes to that, you are, that's why we encourage, we encourage small groups and the cell groups, cell groups, which you meet weekly and also you pray with each other. You have someone you can speak one-to-one with or in a group, and we check up on each other. How to make it for check service. We find out why it's work, whatever, and we're able to speak to our leaders because we're a small group. We know a little bit more than the pastors or the elders. So create a safe space. So if you are lazy member, then encourage you to join a small group because if you're doing life with someone, this much is
And one thing that helps with my friends and family is that now people don't just say how are you, they actually say how's your mental health. Because with how are you, there's this default of like I'm fine. But then if you ask directly, then it brings that opportunity to actually have that conversation. I think that's really helpful. But obviously you need that safe space as well.
Just to add, I think there's a bit of important things to that as well. Particularly in the UK, like when you say how are you, or like how are you. Whereas us watching something, you should apparently generally say how are you.
Well, they really tell you.
That's very true, because that's one of the things that blew my mind when I first moved here. Someone said, how are you right? And I stopped to give a whole overview of my life and they just carried on walking. I was like, that's so rude. Yeah.
I have 5 minutes, so
Okay.
right.
Physically, spiritually, everything, mentally, all of our emotions, everything as we come. So, God doesn't only address our physical well-being, but every areas of it, relational, financial, everything. So yeah, he's not limited to only that. He cares about also not just healing our bodies if it's damaged or broken, but also healing broken hearts, broken minds, broken spirits, loss of faith, everything. He heals all that. So I think, yeah, there are a couple of verses. I don't know if we've got time for me to mention all of them. But I'll give an example of one. So like Timothy 1:7 came out, for God did not give us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind, which is, for me, that speaks to anxiety. But Isaiah 43:1, don't fear, for I have redeemed you, I have called you by name, you are mine. That's anxiety, worry, fear. So there's so many verses for me personally that I feel relate to mental health and our emotional well-being or our state of mind. Yeah.
Yes, the Bible does. Yes, the Bible does mention mental health, and I think God, in His own wisdom, knew that we have the potential to be anxious. And it's funny, things like anxiety all the way back. When you talk about Adam and Eve discovering that they were naked, the Bible talks about sweat falling like drops of blood. There's so many you can see. Although the Bible does not always use the name anxiety, but describes the states, the physical symptoms of expression of anxiety. So it's there right from the beginning. We read about Jesus groaning in the Garden of Gethsemane and tears and words that cannot be understood, which has been argued by many scholars as a state of anxiety. And anxiety is good for our lives. Anxiety is there for a reason. We all need it. It helps us going in many different ways. Although the Bible does not talk directly as saying about mental illness would be this or the other, it gives so many examples in the Old Testament as well as in the New. Because of time, I can't put all, but Philippians 4:7 talks about the peace of God translating beyond understanding and giving our hearts and minds peace in Christ. So God already knew we will need some peace. We will encounter things or life has potential towards us, anything that will unsettle us. So He's already provided provision or assurance, reassurance. There's one scripture in the Old Testament when God talks about in the book of Deuteronomy, where the Lord talks about our striking with madness and blindness, but this was as a result of rebellion that God was talking to them in that way. And we find that carried out in the life of Nebuchadnezzar, where he, because of his rebellion and exalting himself above God, and he ended up living like an animal. Those are examples of changing from one state of mind from mental illness that is demonstrated that way. There are many reasons. Somebody mentioned, I think, asked about the genetic components to this, and that can also come into that. Poor decisions. We read the story of Jonah making the wrong decisions, and then you find himself in the dive of the sea, being swallowed up. But by the time you read his story, when he talks about feeling very in a state of distress and very distressed in political circumstances, because of poor condition, there is the same, day-to-day life. Trauma. Somebody mentioned about trauma. So all these things, and I think the Prosper mentioned a good example of Bible talking about mental illness. People like Elijah, depressed, suicidal. David, depressed at one time. In fact, David had the guts at one point to pretend to be mad. That's what the Bible says. He pretended to be mad to get out of a situation because he thought he was getting into hot soup. Martha is described as anxious at one point and worried about things that were not so important at that time. So I'm saying this to say it is part, even the Bible acknowledges that these feelings, these emotions can be part of our day-to-day life. And then I think the question was, how do you maintain it? Philippians, as we quoted 4:6-7, it says, do not be anxious. And then it gives you how to deal with it, bring it to the Lord in prayer. So prayer is one, bring it to the Lord in prayer. Elijah, when he was feeling depressed and suicidal, Bible says clearly that God gave him something to eat, sent some mechanism to feed him, and then he went to a deep sleep. So eating, feeding, sleeping. And then he said he ate and then he slept again. I mean, it's just resetting the brain, resetting this man so that it can switch back. And sleep does wonders to our mental well-being. So there is prayer, there is proper nutrition, there is adequacy, there is exercise. Actually, Paul says in 1 Timothy that physical exercise benefits a little, but spiritual exercise has more benefits. So he's acknowledging that if you exercise, it does have some benefit. You don't have to go to the gym, you don't have to run around, just walk, do whatever you can at your physical capability and do some exercise. Community network, somebody asked about, is it a worldwide thing that there is a prevalence mental health of the increase? But you will find where there is a lot of community, meaning people are living in healthy relationships, whether with a friend or somebody you can confide in. The impact of many other things on our mental health is so community living. And I think that's why the Bible says do not neglect the coming together, as some are in the habit of doing. So that social space, when I'm feeling a bit down, I'm feeling like I'm overwhelmed with things, the best place to be, I might actually show up in a place like this. I don't intend to say anything, but I want to be around people who I think will say positive things, feed my mind with what can reset me back, think spiritual, to think right. Those things mean a lot. But sometimes we think, I don't want to go there because they will talk. No, I want to be there. I want to be surrounded by that positivity because there is a difference in the atmosphere. So community, social networks mean a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to pass it over to you guys. Does anyone? Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Hi guys.
Hi.
I'm enjoying it. Can you tell? I have a question, right? So at the beginning, we said the difference between mental health and mental illness, right? So now we're looking at biblical aid with mental health. But my question is about mental illness, right? Because mental illness, controversial. Do you think that some people are, like, it's God's intention for them because they were born mentally ill, right? So I'm assuming it's part of God's plan. I'm asking, yeah, what do you think about mental health? And if so, where in the Bible does it give you sort of examples of people who have been mentally ill and are working through it as Christians? Because I don't think we have that many examples of mental illness and working through it practically as a Christian, because that's a real thing. Yeah, mental health, yeah, just like physical health, you can balance it, you can be encouraged, you can, even though it might be difficult, yeah, you can find the energy, but with mental illness, it's very different. You're not gonna apply the same biblical rules to mental illness as you will with mental health, because it's not the thing. So two questions. Do you think mental illness is sometimes God's intention? That's one question. And two, biblically, where does it say how working through it?
Open up to anyone who wants to
The psychiatrist. You talk of Elijah, the Bible says he went in this state for 40 months. So that's a long time. In a state where he was depressed and suicidal. Until God had to find him. So that's somebody living with it and working with and in isolation because he had run away.
But my thing is that, sorry to interject, my thing is that some people are, this is different. I think sometimes your mental health can turn into mental illness, right?
Yeah.
But there are some people who are born with mental illness. There's not a trauma. There's not like a reason for it specifically. Maybe going back to genetics sometimes. Sometimes it's a genetic thing, mental illness, depending on which one.
Let me clarify. There are, from my experience and from what I know, I don't know anyone being born with mental illness. But
So schizophrenia, you just sort of get.
But let me explain.
Sorry.
There are genetic disorders. People can be born with neurodegenerative disorders. Yeah. People can be born having experience maybe through the process of birth or exposure, traumatic, whatever, which alters the neurochemistry, so they don't function or they don't present from birth. There's a disorder or deformity of some kind in their neuro chemical balance and everything. That's a congenital or birth issue. It's not a mental illness. Mental illness means I was once well, and for some reason I am unwell. That's mental illness. Just like you can say I was not diabetic, but for some reason I have become. That's it. Or I didn't have my grades and after. So it starts with being well. For it to be an illness, there has to have been a wellness.
So I'm sorry, I didn't, because I never heard this before.
So when you say somebody's mental health is stable, it means they're well. Yeah. When you say they are ill, it means some things, some factors have been affecting or impacting their ability to function, either to reason, to function practically on a day-to-day basis, and it got to a point where it has kind of almost paralyzed their ability to function and operate like they would have done before. And that's why I say that if it's more than 2 weeks and you're in a state where you're feeling, I can't control this, state of despair, state of giving up, some things beyond the normal, stretched, you have tried this is not working, then you need to see somebody. Normally we say if it's gone more than 2 weeks and it's not resolving, nothing is changing, seek help. Then it can end up being classified as mental illness. I must say, as Elder Prosper said, there are many diagnoses. In mental health, it takes a long time to give diagnosis because one scenario does not necessarily mean you become a playboy with mental illness. It could be a passing thing, it could be a transient thing, it could be a huge stress reaction to something that is just passing, those seasons in life which unsettles you so much. So if I come quick and say, this is the diagnosis, don't forget that goes with you. And because of stigma, we don't want to label people so quickly. So it takes time. So that's the difference. I do not know and I've never heard. I don't think anyone can be born with mental illness. You get unwell. You do different things.
So I think so. You can be born with physical illness, physical illness, but not mental illness. Is it?
You can be born deformed, like you don't have a leg, but
it doesn't have.
Unless it's the congenital issue, neuron,
So
traumatic condition.
with an example of that, he dies in
Yes, right.
Down syndrome, autism are not mental health disorders.
There are there are different categories.
Yeah.
That's why we have mental health teams and learning and disability teams. They are two different fields. So you have the mental health, you have the learning disabilities, and you have the addiction team. Even addiction is not necessarily mental health.
You say never
So-
was plan basic.
So they're all different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is, though, I will say, I don't know if I misunderstood, but what I'm getting is there is like loads of research, for example, in the mental health field that does support you can be genetically more exposed to it because you're vulnerable. Again, it goes back to some of the stuff that I said at the beginning about the glass being whatever, empty or full or whatever, depending on your mental health, who you are, what you've been through, you could react to something and, you know, you could develop schizophrenia, for example. I mean, I'm not saying you are, I'm saying it's an example. So that could happen. Someone could go through the exact same thing. It's not going to trigger schizophrenia for them or psychosis. You know? It's so individual. It's very, very, but yeah, there is research that can support that you are more vulnerable to it if it runs in whatever, if it's in your family, if it's, but it can be just as much genetic as it is, you know, environmental. Or whatever, you know, it's nature versus nurture. Nurture is just as important as the nature part. It's gonna say something that slipped my mind as well. Yeah.
But that's important, the nature versus nurture debate. It's been going for a
Yeah.
long time.
Yeah.
Do you guys think it's God's plan and to everyone, like for us, for people to be genetically predisposed to that? God's plan, or is it just the genetics just God's intention?
Yeah, what's confused me. I think the big question we're asking, right? The big theological aspects that maybe can't be answered in one go. But the issue of genetics a lot of the times is what keeps people up. It's like if God is all knowing and all powerful, how come this person was born with this? This is where we think was the thing His will. And then I think the love is how I would understand it and deal with it is there's a lot of human will that, for instance, if I'm an alcoholic, I'm carrying my baby, and I'm maybe living a certain way that's changing my DNA because of my lifestyle. Then my baby comes out a certain way, or this, or if he's in a household where I'm being beaten and I'm being whatever, and all that stress and tension, then he or she comes away. I don't know if we can say that is God's will or there's not a human action because of the fall, because of brokenness, that influences a lot of this vulnerability to what they becomes. It's a very open question, the nature and nurture. But it is good to grapple with some of these questions because they help to motivate you.
Two scriptures I'll give you. We know very well Jeremiah 29:11. God has no evil thoughts about her. He has only good plans. Psalms 139 says, you made the intricate, the most delicate inner parts all made. And he said, of my body, and you knit me together in my mother's womb. That is God. So everything from the cell, everything that we found out, he already knows. And that's what Psalms 139 verse 13 says. And then it carries on to what we like to quote more. It says, thank you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Now that fearfully, to that wonderfully, when it finally manifests and you're born, the exposure, the environment you grow in also has a lot to do with your development, my development, whether socially, emotionally, you know, and that's why it's important to be careful when we're growing, what we're doing, what we're exposing ourselves to, all our children to. But God has good plans, not for you. Give us a hope and a future. And I don't believe part of that future and hope. Make sure that we are aware of this or the other. We do have options. When he made Adam, he knew he had all those options. Put him in the garden and said, you know, be this, do the other. We can control part of that to some extent when he was good, and we know.
Okay, one last question. Just one response to so I'm a brother that is person is strong social school. That is God that's clear on even children. But I don't think it's necessarily about the fact that at that point you would within his plan take advantage of one things what I mean is that I'm machine totally about these flights where people for this specific but leg or weight and concept of that serious his weakness, his strength, prayers as well. That won't necessarily go away. Get them to but